Emptiness. Today is the day of emptiness. And I like to start to tell a little bit about emptiness. Emptiness is basically on all levels you can find emptiness. Emptiness of the mind, emptiness of the heart, emptiness connected with the pelvic, coccyx. But still, there is a kind of development towards emptiness as well. And I'm not saying that is the development, but it's a development towards emptiness. And I like to talk a little bit about that. It's for me very much also connected with the story of my mother. My mother, due to a great amount of little hemorrhages of the brain, lost her mind. And in losing her mind, basically I saw a whole development, which was really kind of amazing, beautiful, and very, very touching. She's still alive, totally in emptiness. There's no mind left, as what we would say is a mind. There's no memory left. But she's still here. And when you look to the mind, when we move beyond the busy mind, beyond thoughts, what we do is kind of we move into the silence which is there in between the thoughts, which brings us into silence. And it's a kind of wakening up in which we witness our own thoughts more clearly. And by witnessing your own thoughts, you become aware that they're kind of built like clouds, clusters. There's clusters of thoughts. And then there is a sucker hole, which is filled with silence. Sometimes our mind is so clouded that we cannot find the silence anymore. But there is always a moment of silence there if we wait long enough. And especially when we just surrender to our thoughts and don't interfere, just let them be. Just let the mind associate. And this we do before we fall asleep. Before we fall asleep, we take something to think about often, or don't think about anything, but just the mind starts to run its own way. And then at a certain moment, if you look at your thoughts, the thoughts gets more and more associative. It's not kind of, it doesn't make sense anymore so much. And then at once there is this silence. And this is an opening for us kind of, to move more deeply inside ourselves.
Kijk, tot hen zichzelf af.
I feel it kind of high. I feel it kind of high.
Het stopt.
So the silence, if we follow the silence of the mind and kind of, we let ourselves sink down to the whole area of awareness, of being, then again when you look to feelings, to experiences, they come and go. And if we move back, then this silence deepens itself in stillness.
The silence what?
Deepens itself into stillness, which is a blend between the silence of the mind and the still of the heart. And stillness basically is called a state of meditation. So we've been working in the courses a lot with stillness.
Are you saying that the sucker hole in the heart is the stillness?
The sucker hole in the heart is the still. That's where
Instead
it's
of the
still. It's different as silent. It's still. And the moment that kind of the mind and the heart are more moving together, then stillness comes forward. So stillness is also in the mind, it's also in the heart, in both areas. To say it like this, you can find it. And stillness, in a way, is felt silence, experienced silence. It's not only the silence of the mind, but the experience is added to it. It's more deep, more rich, as silence itself seems to be. It's slightly different. Although silence, when you totally move with silence, in the head it's also it's a whole platter which also connects everything. So when we look to silence, silence basically is empty of thoughts. Silence in sound is empty of sound.
You say that again?
Silence in sound, on the level of sound, is empty of sound. So both stillness and silence have a connection with emptiness. It's empty of something. It's basically the container of experience. It's the container of thoughts. If you look to your hand, fingers come and go. But the space in between the fingers is there forever. So if you move from silence to stillness, then the drop down behind that, the deeper experience behind that, is emptiness. And again, when you look to emptiness, emptiness is not empty. It's containing everything. But it's the empty space which is surrounding everything. So, looking at the story of my mother, and the slow deterioration, basically, of her mind, at a certain moment, what came forward is that she became very sentient, very much moving through her feelings. She became like a child again, and related through experience, through feelings, and not through mind. Most of her life, she was really very much in her intellect, and very much dividing between good and bad and right and wrong, very much like most of the generation of our parents, very much kind of into the rules, how things should be. After my father died, she brought forward that she really wanted to stay in the house where they lived most of their lives, my whole childhood, together, and didn't want to go to any other place, and rather would die and leave. And at a certain moment, her mind started to deteriorate, but she was still conscious enough to see that it deteriorated. And that's very, very, very fearful. It's like you lose the control of the mind. And one day she found herself half naked, the lower half of herself, on the street. She was on her way to the bathroom and she totally lost her direction. And that was so shameful for her. Also because I rubbed it in a little bit. Do you want to find yourself more like this, or do you want to move to a home where people are taking care of you because you cannot take care of yourself anymore? And she went to a home, and my sister and my brother found the most beautiful home for her, which is very small scaled. You buy an apartment there and you pay a little bit every month, the same as you would pay in every other home, but because there is no managing, no manager or whatever, it's just nurses and a doctor who take care with caretakers. The price is the same basically, and it's very small scale, and there is one-on-one. That means one caretaker on one patient. And my mother really kind of loves it there. Now she doesn't love it there anymore because it's not there anymore. But the deteriorating of the control, the let go of control, which was forced with her, brought forward such a deepening of feeling, such an authenticity of the heart. And she went back into childhood, but at the same time you could see that she could really, really enjoy very little things and could look for hours to the sunlight playing through a tree and really kind of being in this atmosphere. Totally experiential. And she was more talking experimental, reacting according to her feelings. We visited a little bit in the end of the end of this period with Doria. We visited my mother, and she saw Dodo, and she started to cry. Such a deep sadness came out. You remember that? And Dodo was freaked out by it, so she ran away, but she kind of came back and was really there for my mother, which was amazing, as small as she was. Then the next stage is where also the feelings kind of more and more kind of lost their form. I'm not saying that she doesn't have feelings anymore, but again, what we feel, what we experience is so often based on memory. What we feel, what we experience is based on what we recognize. We recognize love. We recognize joy. We recognize beauty. So a lot of our experiences, like our thoughts, are based on memory. And every time it's a little bit different, but we recognize it because we memorize it. You understand? There is an entanglement in experiencing, in feeling. So also this memory slowly went away. And that kind of brought her back into emptiness. And last time I visited my mother, I went with a walk with her in the park. And she's looking around, and everything comes in, but nothing she's entangled with. Nothing has a name. Nothing is experienced in the way as how we are used to experience. It's just there. It's part of her. It's like In this depth of emptiness, the surroundings are no longer, in a way, apart from you. It's part of her and she's part of it. It's the experience of unity we also have as a baby. So this also brings forward, when you move in the depth of emptiness, everything is there. It's full. All the forms which are coming forward you can find in emptiness. But it's empty of a separate self. So that means that every experience, when you perceive through emptiness, in the depth of emptiness, stands on itself. It's a form coming forward, it stands on itself and it dissolves by itself. There is no, how do you say it? There's an absolutely perception of what is there, but there is no entanglement.
Or integration?
No,
It's
it's
all
just
separate.
there. It's not separate, it's just there. It's part of you. And you're part of it, but it's not what you are. So why would you move there? What is so worthwhile kind of in moving into this level? What is the reward? This is what we want to know. Why would I meditate? What is the reward? So when you kind of, the reward of meditation on the level of the mind is moving into the backdrop of the mind, peacefulness, silence. That's quite a reward if there's silence of the mind. In the heart, it's an openness, the joy, the happiness, the bliss which comes forward, the ecstasy, maybe. But the stillness. Stillness which brings forward to experience whatever is there to experience. Stillness which brings forward the being. And the interbeing. The loving connection which is between everything what is created. Everything is created from love. It's like walking through Juneau, and every tree, every building, the water, everything is alive. And everything is reflecting back love. The backdrop to emptiness brings forward a greater freedom. In this disentanglement, and disentanglement means that we don't hook in things. Every form is allowed to take form as it is. There is an incredible freedom in this. It's not what you are. And at the same time, you are it. It's not separate from you, but it doesn't define you. That means that you can feel totally at one with another person. The other person is not separate from you, but the other person doesn't define you. So the more we are asleep, the more we are basically hooked into each other. And we project on each other that the other person is defining us. You recognize what I'm saying? Even when we are confused, a bird which is flying through the air is defining us. It's a very egoic state of being, in which we project ourselves in everything what happens. It's telling something about us. A bird is shitting on your head, and that's because God needs to revenge because you, in your early childhood, said something bad about God. Or let's say it like this, it sounds crazy, but sometimes we have this kind of stories we make up, or we try to find proof for something in what just takes form around you. So we are looking for, what is causing what. When you move into emptiness more deeply, there's a wisdom coming forward in which you see more the laws by which form take place. And the entanglement we have with these forms are our lessons. And they follow a certain laws as well. But it's not more as our lessons. It's not a truth. It's not an absolute truth. It's a certain interaction in which we are finding proof again and again that we are entangled. Nothing else. If we are entangled in rejection, from the perspective of emptiness, you see forms coming forward, and you see that the rejection time after time plays off, and time after time we find proof that the world is rejecting us. Time after time we find proof that the world is unsafe. Time after time we find proof that we are not clever, that we're pretty stupid. Or time after time we find proof that we are very clever. Time after time we find proof that we are loved. Or time after time we find proof that we are not loved. Time after time we find proof that we belong. Time after time we find proof that we don't belong. It's amazing how the same form which comes forward in different people gives absolute different stories. And emptiness, this deepest level, when we kind of perceive more through emptiness in this whole interaction, gives an incredible freedom and understanding of how this works. How we basically create all our own reality. Which is beautiful, there's nothing wrong with it. And emptiness gives you the freedom to move out of this reality. To move beyond the reality. That doesn't mean that your reality is gone. But it's an incredible teacher on the deepest level, as silence is on its level, as stillness is in its level, or still is in its level. You are not your experience. It's basically that the form which comes forward, whatever form comes forward, is not defining you. There is an incredible freedom in that. That means when you get entangled, it's not absolute anymore. The moment we give form, the moment we make choice in life, the moment we interact, we take form. At that moment you become a form, you take form. You put something in the world, you take form. When we are very much stuck in our minds, if we once take form in a certain way, we have to take form always in this way. There's very little freedom in it. If you once like berries, you always like berries. You recognize what I'm talking about? It has to be like this. This is the truth. This is how it is. It cannot be in a different way. When we're strongly in ego, in giving form is the same. We have to be right. Sometimes you see people having to be right and pushing through their right. Everybody knows that they're not right, but still they have to push through their right. The sky is green. And in the end we say, yeah, okay, the sky is green. And we feel sorry for such a person. You recognize what I'm talking about? It has to be like this. This is the truth. We see this in politics, especially when people talk about politics. We see this in, facts which are given sometimes. So this is getting totally entangled with a form, a fear that when, you're not right, when this form is not exactly as how you can control it, as how you say, there's nothing left. You have to hold on to it. There's a lot of fear in the background. So emptiness basically gives you the freedom to move in form and out of form. Every moment can be a different form. So it brings you into being alive in a way. To fully exist. Fully exist here, now, in the moment. The freedom to change form. The freedom to replace yourself in all the forms which are available in that moment. The freedom to become a tree, a butterfly, a bird, another person. So in this, we all know this. Empathy, when you look to it, is the ability to replace ourselves. This works through emptiness. To replace yourself in another form.
So the practical side how do we perceive through emptiness? We chose the coccyx. It's the base of the nervous system. It's a center bone, the whole basis of physical human manifestation. It's part of our body, which we often kind of leave out of our perception because it's so much bone, it's pure bone, raw matter. At least for me it was hard for some years to even make a feeling connection with the coccyx. Now, during this whole process of emptiness, I fell down the stairs and broke the coccyx, which makes it a lot easier to stay connected, because it's which is quite a service to bring the attention there. In many, many ways, we deny that we're physically here also, that we are bone and body. Our consciousness easily escapes it, goes up into these wonderful psychic realms. Our awareness, even pure unconditional awareness, can allow almost anything except the absence of itself. It's so unconditionally accepting, it misses its shadow, which is the very emptiness that allows it to expand, that allows it to retract or freeze, allows it to move. The coccyx is quite extreme in the sense that it's bone and empty space, bone and empty, bone and empty. There's not much blood and other stuff happening there, so when we really move our consciousness into the coccyx, we're in a way penetrating in the most intimate way to us. It's our body, it's our coccyx. We're penetrating the physical. Something which is us, our consciousness or our awareness or our existence, is taking responsibility for this raw matter, the physical matter at the base of our humanness. Which is why it can be quite hard to stay there, or even a little bit irritating. I don't know if any of you noticed at the first stage of the guided meditation there was some irritation. Let's get out of this coccyx already. There is a lot of irritation there, so it's important to hang there, not to push, not to pull. We've said already that consciousness itself is very much connected with time and timelessness and eternity. In the same way, awareness is very much connected with space and infinity. Time and space together makes form. If we just take the simplest physical, factual level, we have a lifetime. We have a time period in which we're physically alive in this body. We have a certain amount of space which we take. Neither the time nor the space is stable. We can change dimensions. We begin as babies. We grow. The space is changing. Later on we begin to shrink. All the cells in the body, they're very contours, they're obeying certain rules, but they're changing constantly. Even that the space is changing, the time is changing. Together they make the idea of a person, the time and the space. And we keep ourselves limited, restricted, with this idea of our own time and our own space, as if the space we got and the time we got says who we are. But time can't exist without eternity in the background. At the same time, we are eternal. Space can't exist without infinity in the background. Physically, it can be hard to sense, but if you think energetically, you can see certain people who won't take space. They pull themselves in. Or they don't even take the space of their own body. They stand next to their own body like this. You know? And then when they have an experience of happiness or joy, suddenly they're allowed to take space. The infinite comes forward, maybe for a while, then they retreat again to what they believe is the space that they can take. All of this is moving within the space of infinity. So perception through emptiness involves a basic principle that all that can be seen and all that can be felt or experienced is not who you are. It's seen by you. It's felt by you. You are so much more than it. Nothing which is transient, which is passing in time, need bother us. Nothing that is passing in time, which is transient, need bother us. It doesn't need to bother us. Because we are the one that sees time passing. Nothing that is limited in space, that has a form like a cube, need disturb us. Because we are the one that can see it, that can feel it. We can pass through. It's not real in the sense that it's going to pass, it's going to change. We might recognize this from the layer of experience. If we have a very blissful experience and we hold on to it, we try and clutch it, it tends to stop. It tends to vanish, like I'm in bliss. If we really just let it go, let it be, it becomes more alive, it expands. So when we put the eyes and the ears and the sensations into the coccyx, and really perceive from there, there is quite a quickening, because nothing keeps us stuck. And it becomes clear how much everything is perspective. What we see in any moment is changing. It's anyway our perspective from the place that we sit and see, but it's also completely subjective and changing, moment by moment. And that's really okay, because the one that sees is stable. It's not changing. Our feelings are unstable. They are the feelings which arise in a particular time for a time and pass. When we attend to them, we let them be, and we listen to them or feel them, they begin to change more and tell where they're coming from. And this can even be a physical pain. If you have a pain in the shoulder and you really allow the pain and just experience the sensation, like as a phenomena of the pain, often it then moves. It says where it came from. You can start chasing it. This is something that comes from emptiness and allowance, because it's really okay. In the world of psychology, we have consciousness and we have unconsciousness. And psychology developed a little bit by saying that the unconscious is important. That which we chuck away could come back to bother us. But it didn't really develop that far beyond that. We have, in the way our consciousness tries to control the experience of being alive, a lot of stuff that we throw away into the emptiness. It doesn't exist. As if we could say it doesn't exist, as if we could do that. It didn't happen. It's not there. I'm not afraid. I won't look at this. As if not looking like a child makes it go away. You know, a 2-year-old doesn't want to see something. No, the 2-year-old that wants to hide will go like this. Because if you can't see him, if he can't see you, he's invisible. So we do this as adults with stuff that we don't want to deal with. This means that in a process of emptiness, which is a process of liberation and self-realization, a lot of fears can arise. Fears of things that have been chucked in the emptiness, chucked away. But there is no away. Away is outside of perception. Some of our greatest fears, one of our greatest fears, of course, and we're all doing it, partly in order to be able to function, is the fear of death. Either of ourselves or another. As if it could be prevented by not looking at it, by not allowing it. As if, in our case, we don't die. This body will stay. As long as we go like this, it's not going to get us. In any moment now. It's not like we have to be unafraid of death, but this is a process of living to allow even the transience of the body, which is a fact. It's one of the certainties. At the core of every fear is pure liberation. Meaning, when we move with our perception through emptiness, and let's say, just as an example, we meet the fear of death, of mortality, and it's just one example. It can be rejection, abandonment, betrayal, insanity. That we know the fears. We each have our own concoction, which we're working with, which is a great service to others. So let's say we're moving through emptiness and we meet this fear of death, which is an old fear that we chucked into the emptiness. There is a factor of patience and time, because in a way, it is alive. It's always been there. It comes to life. It seems to come to life from our perspective because we haven't been looking there. And it's suddenly coming before us. In such a way that the death, the physical death, is more terrifying, or more absolute, or more powerful than the life which is witnessing it, witnessing the fear. So the fear becomes stronger, becomes the boss over the existence which is feeling the fear, over you who can feel the fear. This is a process of emptiness, because what we're actually observing or allowing is that also the body will pass. Also the body is in time. Also it's in space. Also for us. We're all together in that. At a certain stage, because we stay in the fear, or stay in the experience, we allow it, this thing which has been thrown into the emptiness, to come back inside. At a certain stage, with the cooking process, it becomes clear that we are the one, the source of death. Source of life, we are the life. So we are the source of the death. We are more than this fear. We're even more than our physical death. This is a process of realization. And in this way we move to the core of the fear, and the fear becomes liberated. It doesn't mean it won't confront us a lot later on, but its hold on our perception, on what we're allowed to feel and what we're allowed to experience, and on where we can move with courage and service, is released. It means we have the courage to recognize maybe that we're dying, or to be with another when they're dying. It means we have the empathy to allow the grief of another, because it has become free, this fear. It's realized. That's one example of the kind of processes of emptiness which lead to, basically, to liberation. Now, the stuff that we throw into the emptiness is very much connected with our karma, with our life service, because each one has his own thing that he chucks out, that we don't let exist, that's not allowed to be there. Sooner or later, and it doesn't matter if we meditate or not, sooner or later we will meet this. It's ours. It can be through playing out in the world, it can be just through the area of feeling, but sooner or later it will come, this old friend that we don't look at. Every moment that we're able to allow and accept these fears, or these, at first it seems like horrors, or these sufferings, into the whole, into the unity, is an incredible service. It brings a reward. To the whole. When we really allow suffering to the depths, we really allow it to be in us, through us, to take us over, to surrender to any kind of suffering, a kind of magic happens. And this is a kind of alchemy where suffering turns to passion. And passion and suffering, they actually mean the same thing. The passion of Christ. There is a switch. And in this passion, it kind of happens like this. You have your personal suffering, let's say with the issue of addiction, or family members who have died by alcoholism or whatever. At a certain stage, the roots of this, you come into emptiness, the roots of this emerge, the incredible pit, unending pit of need, or another kind of emptiness, hollowness. Truly allow it. Within the truly allowing it, what becomes clear is this suffering has no name, no person attached to it, no ego, it's not yours, it's just suffering. It's a flavor of pain. It belongs to the whole. And with the release of this person which you've been carrying, this ego, is born this passion to be of service to the whole. And the passion is very, very, very powerful. To make a bit of difference in whatever area, whether it's, like this example, addiction. For some people it's working with dying people or with grief. Whatever it is, abuse. The passion rises with a power for life.
Nature can be everything.
Form begins to emerge again of itself, which is very much attuned to your purpose. As it rises, passes, it begins to take form, passes through the whole home area, Hara, the mother, or the universe, comes into the heart level. At any stage we could get hooked. Okay, I'm now going to be a grief therapist, yeah. You know, but then we go back again, and the ego burns and it rises again. This is the cycle. It's totally okay also. That's part of a process. But as it rises and begins to be expressed in the world, the passion is felt as ecstasy. The ecstasy of being, manifesting. Quite unconditional happiness. Happiness to be of service. Happiness to be in life. And it rises, continues rising. It's a bit like a torpedo. Quite unconditional to your own financial survival. And at the level of consciousness where things are structured and put to plan, maybe a business plan, this, that, what often comes forward is bliss. The bliss of being conscious, awake, making a difference, having an impact. The bliss of creating a better world. You know, we often talk about creating a reality as a bad thing, which it often is. But there's a great bliss in creating a reality which is of service. Which isn't the absolute reality, but is of service to the whole. And of course the bliss is surrendered upwards as it is a movement of service. It sounds like a great big process, but it can happen daily. It's happening all the time with many, many little things. It's part of the tremendous beauty of being free and being human. It can be just by patting a stray cat on the street. This circulation is happening. That unconditional circulation.